Very special thanks to Affordable Prestige Cars in Glastonbury for providing the Jag in this review. And of course, if you want to check out a Jag such as an XK, an XF, an XJ, or even some other brands as well, then that is pretty much their speciality. So you can click the link right below this video in the description, see what they've currently got for sale, and their rotation of stock is pretty regular, so you'll want to check in early and often if you're looking for a new Jag. And here we finally are. It's about time, I'm sure that's what many of you are probably thinking, myself included, to feature the main 4 versions of the XK here on the channel. For those who don't know, I owned one myself. It was the previous shape 4.2R, and I'm a huge fan of the Jag XK. I've reviewed the earlier X100 shape more recently. I've reviewed the 4.2 XK, the 4.2 XKR, and of course the 5-litre XKR as well. This one finally completes the primary 4 with the base 5-litre, the XK. Now, this particular version that I'm driving is actually super rare. It's called the Heritage Edition, and it's a tribute to the 50th anniversary of the Jag E-Type. Only 50 of this spec were ever made, so it really is a collector's item. The interior is two-tone. It has the more classic style wheels with old school Jaguar logos, and in the headrests as well. It has more of a classic feel to it. And for the discerning eye, you'll notice it has the 4.2 style details here and there, such as the older headlights, the side vents, which the mainstream 5-litres didn't have, and that's because this is one of the earlier cars in that second run. Now, this one ran in 5-litre form, not the Heritage Edition, but just the 5-litre in general, from 2009 to 2015 or so. Technically 2014, but you'll still find a few active R versions in that 2015 range. This particular car is a 2011, which means it still shares some of the older components. You're looking at a later car if you want the full brand new 5-litre. You know, new lights front and back, new styling, redesigned side vents, all that kind of thing. Now, for full exposure, this is actually the second time I've driven a 5-litre XK, and I don't mean the other R that I reviewed, I mean actually just the base model. However, the other one which I drove, and unfortunately didn't get the chance to review, was the full new facelift 5-litre base model, which has the same engine as this, but it has all of those newer styling points that I mentioned. Now, I like that one more than this, to be honest, because to me, if you're gonna go for a 5-litre, you may as well go for a full 5-litre, like the full facelift, toward the end of the run, because at the end of the day, if you're going to buy a 5-litre XK, chances are it's because you want to get one that's a little bit more pricey, has all of the kit, and is probably newer and has much lower mileage. So you've got a much larger budget than, for instance, when I entered buying an XK, which is why I chose, among many reasons, the 4.2R. It is much more affordable currently on the market, especially when I bought one, and it offered exactly what I wanted from the car. I didn't need the extra power, I didn't need the extra performance, and personally I, to this day, prefer the look of the older shape, the X150 4.2. However, that brings me to the reason for the thumbnail, because this will be a controversial episode. I know a lot of you guys, XK fans and otherwise, have agreed with most of the statements that I've made, with the standout probably being that I prefer the 4.2 over the 5-litre, which many people would probably disagree with. This one, though, will be doubtless the most controversial point I have yet, because I believe that this is actually a better car than the 5-litre R, and the reason why is about balance. Now, if you're the Clarkson kind of petrol head, and you just want more power all the time, then good for you, you know, that's great. Go for full performance, go for full power if that's what floats your boat. For me, what's the point in having 503 horsepower if I can't use all of that, or even 80-90% of it most of the time in the UK? Especially with the kind of weather we have, the kind of roads we drive on, and much of that depends on how often you drive it, where in the UK you live, etc. For me, using mine as my daily driver, it just didn't make sense. That ties in directly to why I like this one more than the R. Because the previous generation, the base model had 300 horsepower, and to me that always felt like it was just a little bit too low. And incidentally, there's a super rare 3.5 litre V8 version with only 250 horsepower. That must feel very slow in comparison to the others, but hey, at least it's super rare for the collector. This one has 385 horsepower, so it's not as powerful as the 4.2R, but it's way more powerful than the previous base model. That is why I love this one so much. That feels like the perfect amount of power for a base model, certainly, but also for the kind of spirit that that 5-litre engine offers. Sure, it's got ruckus performance, but this one, it feeds into the elegance of the XK, I believe, more than the R version does. Because in my generation, the 4.2, it feels more brutal, but in a almost restrained sense, and it's hard to describe it more than that unless you've actually driven one. The 5-litre XKR is much more overtly brutal. It's louder, it's more inclined to spin up its tyres from the extra torque and power. It's very much so a pure high-performance car. This one is much more about the cruising side, the elegant side, with more than enough performance to boot, but only when you actually want it to be fast. The rest of the time, it's almost more like driving a piece of visual art, and that simply appeals to me more than the R version does. In a similar way to why I love stuff like Maseratis, Paganis and Spikers, they are drivable art, in my opinion. Now, with that being said, it's no slouch. 5.2 seconds 0 to 60 is barely behind the R model from my shape, and of course it's speed limited to 155, but with that kind of power, I would suspect it could probably do around 170 without the limiter, which, let's be honest, is more than enough for a base model. In terms of fuel economy, if you are interested in that, the officials are 16 to the gallon city, 35 motorway or highway for our American friends, and 25 average. Interestingly, most owners, according to aggregator sites, do get about 24 average. So that's fairly close to what you should expect. That's about 1 to 2 miles per gallon average more than I used to get out of my R, which, given that this does have less power and it's naturally aspirated, which is technically less efficient than a supercharger, that's not bad. It means that you can use it every day if you want to. Tank-wise, it's 15.5 UK gallons, just over 70 litres, which means the range is around 370 miles, maybe 380 to 400 if you push it more on the motorway. But 370 is the average you should be expecting. So in other words, very similar to that previous car. To me, that is why I love this one so much. It feels, I would argue, fairly strongly in fact, more than the R version, a best of both worlds kind of XK. Because it has much of the charm and more of the, you could say, reliability side of the earlier 4.2s, but with the added torque, the added vibe, you could say, and that may sound wishy-washy, but it has, newer styling, it feels updated, it feels fresher of that newer car kind of mixed together. And even though I wasn't interested in buying a 5-litre, I can definitely understand why many people would, even this one, which is nowhere near being the fastest version. To me, I would actually go so far as to say that the 5-litre XK, such as this one, or the other one which I drove with the full facelift, is actually my second favourite version of the XK overall, second only to the one which I bought, the 4.2R. My rankings, in fact, would go 4.2R, 5-litre base, 4.2 base, 5-litre R. So yes, the 503 horsepower R is actually my least favourite of the four, which I know is sacrilegious to many people, but that's just the way it falls for me personally. What that car offers isn't really what I'm looking for. Overall, to me, this is a perfect addition to the other three which I've done. In terms of used values, you're looking at about the 14 to 38 grand region, which is a pretty wide swath, and that depends on, especially if you buy one of these, not the limited edition, but one of the earlier ones which still shares the older cars, for instance lights and some of the styling that hasn't been fully facelifted. If you're looking for the full, brand newer 5-litre, newly redesigned, newer interior here and there, etc., then one of those is going to be on the 20, 25, 30 grand spectrum, all the way up to 38,000 or so, if you want the lowest mileage and the newest cars, like a 2014, 2015. So it really does depend on how much you want to spend, and what kind of details, what kind of condition you're looking for. Now, speaking of that condition, there has been some talk about the reliability comparison between the 4.2 and the 5-litre, and of course I actually did a showdown between the 4.2 and the 5-litre R models here on the channel. Very popular episode of Rivals within the Beards and Cars series, and we will be revisiting the XK multiple times in future now that this one's added to the roster, and of course More recently, I added the X100 shape, the slightly older cigar-shaped XK as well, so stick around for those. In terms of the issues that the 5-litre engines can have though, there are 3 in particular that seem to come up. 2 issues with the engine, 1 not so much. The most common one is water pump issues. Cooling in general, that's something to look out for. Second thing is not related to the engine. Actually, funnily enough, similar to the old Quattroporte which I had, the TPMS sensor for the tyres. Those can sometimes get a little bit out of whack. They can tell you that tyres are in a condition that they're not necessarily in, that you need to fill up this tyre or that tyre with air, and they're not correct. That tends to be more of an issue on these newer cars. The final thing is the timing chain. That's come up a few times in comments compared to the older vehicles. That one doesn't seem to be as common, but it can be an issue when it does happen, and it seems to be at least more of an issue on the 5 litres than it is on the equivalent older 4.2 engines. Ultimately, both types of XK, both engine generations, offer a lot to love. I would say that if you're looking purely for performance, then you may want to go for the 5 litre, because the top end potential straight out of the factory is superior. That's all there is to it. However, I would argue that if you're more the kind of person such as I was, wherein you're planning to use the car a lot, maybe even as a daily, which I know most people won't, but I did, and I know some others do as well, the guy that I bought mine off was using his every day as well, then I would strongly recommend looking more into the 4.2, because it's more of a robust daily driver kind of engine. To me, the difference between the 4.2 and the 5 litre is that fundamentally the 4.2 feels like it can take more of a beating. It's more of a daily, more of a workhorse, for want of a better word, not to make it sound like a diesel. The 5 litre is more of a pure performance engine. To me, the 5 litre cars are more the kind of vehicles that you take out as a weekend toy, whereas the 4.2s are more something you could use every day. And that's where this one comes in, because this one straddles the line between the two. It's not quite as hardcore or as brutal or not necessarily temperamental, but as focused in pure performance as the R version is, but it has a clear performance advantage over the previous base, way more power, and also has the advantage over the one that I bought of the newer styling, various other updates, electronic and otherwise, if you want those. Plus it's newer, lower mileage, may have a more recent service history, all that kind of good stuff. So ultimately, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on the main 4 XKs. And I am, as I said, going to be revisiting them in terms of comparing them to each other, such as the base 4.2 versus this 5 litre base. So of course stick around on the channel for that, and I am most definitely going to be comparing the X100 XKR to the X150 XKR. So again, stick around for that as well, because I think that one is going to be, well, probably fairly popular based on the amount of comments that I asked for stuff like that. Overall though, that's it for my thoughts. If you were an owner of one of these, if you currently are, put your stories and thoughts down below. Do you disagree with anything? Well, if so, put it down below. And of course, if you are a potential buyer, take a look at the comments for people's stories and maybe pieces of advice of what to look out for, what to preemptively do. And until next time, I'll see you then. But of course, check out my other Jag and specifically XK content by clicking the playlist here on the screen, and you can find all of the episodes of Beards and Cars, including those rival showdowns, in that same playlist as well. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.